Welcome to this episode of Stat Chat. In this episode, I'm going to be having a good look at whether or not you should move or improve. So any of you out there that may be thinking about moving this year, stick with the presentation because you might get some little golden nuggets out there that might form your opinion slightly differently to perhaps before you've watched it. Now, obviously, I'm an estate agent, so undoubtedly quite a few of you are probably going to just sit there and think this presentation is all going to be about pushing you to move. It actually isn't. We've been very balanced to give you some good statistics and numbers in there, which will maybe, if anything, do the opposite to what you're perhaps thinking I'm going to say. So I think the most important thing here is some people, when they put it as the market, I don't think maybe fully think about what they're currently in, and more importantly, the cost of what it's going to be to change, which we'll go through, because those do have quite important factors as whether or not your decision making is going to go one way or the other. So let's jump into it and we'll have a really good look. So ultimately, really, is it the smart decision to move or improve? Well, one of the questions that a lot of people probably start off with is how much is the house is worth? But actually, a really good question is, what will it cost me to move? And actually, is it worth a move? Because often you can find that you can spend quite a lot of money on the next purchase, but you don't get that much back for it. And so it's worth doing this in the sort of digging around before you've even put the house in the market, just to make sure you've covered all of the angles. So you're going in fully in the picture, knowing what you're walking into. So what I've done, we've looked at the average completed price in Stratford over the last 12 months, which was just over 430,000. So we based a lot of the figures around that and made an assumption that a natural progression would probably go from that price up to 550. Now, of course, that's going to change depending on what price range you buy, whether it's higher or lower. The cost will be dictated on that, as you'll see. But that's we try to just base it roughly around those numbers. So it is going to cost you headline numbers anywhere between £25,000 to £35,000 to move, which, let's face it, is an awful lot of money, because realistically, all you're actually doing in many ways, that is just a process cost. You don't really get anything for that. It's just a facilitated cost to get the move to happen. So what that breaks down to, as you'd expect, the lion's share of that goes out into stamp duty. The other associated costs there, you've got estate agency fees, legal fees, removal fees, any maybe mortgage broker fees, etc. But the lump pot, if you took the middle one, is going to be around about £30,000. Again, it does depending on what price range you're buying on, but that just gives you an idea, which is obviously a fairly considerable amount of money. So like we said, that is really just a cost move. You don't really see any particular benefit from it other than allowing you to go from position A to position B. So what you want to look at is say, well, okay, if you rework your mind, if you invested that £30,000 back into your existing property, what could that do? So then you're looking down a slightly deeper level. So that would probably really should be paying for a new kitchen, probably go a chunk towards making a good refurbishment, whether that's maybe bathrooms or decorating or carpets, etc. It will probably contribute some way towards an extension as well. The other thing you could also do, if you're quite smart, is maybe lock in some planning, because when you get a planning permission approval, that gives you a 3-year shelf life. So that can be a quite useful little investment tool, because you sell it with the benefit of planning, so you get that locked in there. So there are quite a few layers there of different things that you can spend that money on, which will go quite a long way to actually doing it. And the upside of that, of course, is that because you're then improving your existing house, you're kind of getting a 3-tiered uplift. One is that you would like to think, if you do it properly, your value of your existing house will increase because you've made those appropriate improvements. It will then undoubtedly probably improve the saleability. And then also you get enjoyment out of the changes that you've made. So there is a multi-tiered layer of improvements and uplifts that you're getting if you did the work as opposed to just moving. So as I say, it does require a little bit of thought. I think what's also really worth bearing in mind, if you're unsure what's going to give you the best return for your investment, that's what we're here for. So give us a call and we'd happily talk you through where we think you could improve the house the best, where the sweet spot's going to be that's going to give you the maximum return. And a key thought really, obviously, when you move, you're spending money. When you improve, you are really reinvesting it. So it's just sort of moving the pots of money around, but more importantly, it's probably protecting a pot. The other thing to remember, obviously, typically when you're moving, the costs for those moves, like stamp duty, etc., and estate agency fees and solicitor fees often come from the equity that's been grown in the property. Where we're talking about improvements, you're then either going to have the available cash or you're going to have to remortgage to do it. So this is where it needs to be balanced in terms of the return of what it's going to cost you to do those improvements, because often the money you use to move is obviously wrapped up within the equity of the house, which you can't really do for improvements unless you remortgage, of course. So really, the framework probably to think of is like, what are the critical points? Well, obviously there are certain things. If the location is wrong, then you've got to move. It obviously goes without saying that you just need to change the sort of surroundings that you're in. Sometimes you're prohibited. So let's say if you're in an apartment, you just can't change the property where you perhaps would like to. But then improvement can be, you're happy with where you are, you might have kids and they're settled in school, etc. You just perhaps want a slightly different layout, or you need a little bit more space, might be working from home, for etc. So those are sort of things where you might fall into the improve rather than the move. And like we've said, really, it kind of does say you're getting a real kind of layered improvement by spending the money on your existing house. So the final thoughts really is, it is actually surprised, like I said at the beginning, this presentation, as you see, isn't actually really promoting you to sell it. I think it just requires you to do this exercise before you go about the idea of moving, just to make sure that you are absolutely squared away in your own mind that moving is the right solution and not just improving where you are. And like we said, know your numbers. So really the best thing to do is then, obviously we can come and have a look at the house, give you an idea of the value. We can then also give you hopefully a fairly accurate idea of what it might be worth if those works are done. We're also pretty good at knowing our numbers of what those works might cost. But I think that's the thing. If you don't know those numbers, then you're kind of going in a bit blind. I think with such a big decision as moving home, it is well worth doing a little bit of a deep dive before you start the process and getting this out of the way, because that will just give you clarity of thought to say, yeah, I'm absolutely locked in, I'm making the right decision either way. So as you know, we're going to be releasing lots of these videos. So please, if you've enjoyed it, like, subscribe. It really helps the channel and get other people in the same situation you to get some visibility around these tips and ideas. And so, yeah, also say, look, thanks for watching. See you soon.